you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the fourth dimension? Imagine if all Doctor Who had the atmosphere and direction of episode 1 of Unearthly Child. Quite frankly, the perfect intro to the best story premise ever. On a hotter take, the caveman politics just work for me. The threat and the fear are captivating in a story that's just as much about humanity as it is time travel.
It's pulp sci-fi gold.
At first, anyway. The padding and the directionless plotting of its second half really let the side down. Give me Cushing, any day. The titular boy's portrayal in this first outing makes me feel just like a small kid did back in the 60's, and that's not nothing. The edge of destruction. Awkward bottle episode? Psychological horror? This question mark covered cabin fever tale is hardly impressive or exciting, but does wonders for this crew's dynamic. If you didn't resonate with Ian or Barbara before, you will now. It's also over before it becomes a hassle. Marco Polo is a 60s TV epic. The pacing, the mind games, variety, and all surviving photos paint this gorgeous, tense road trip down the Silk Road that's quite like anything Doctor Who's done before or since. That said, I am kind of glad it's missing. I think it's best experienced in prose. The word runaround doesn't actually mean anything. It's an empty criticism. Every plot is a runaround if you want to get derogatory about it, but it's still the best word to describe Keys of Marinus. Sheer 25-minute Terry Nation variety hour nonsense. It's always going to be fun, don't get me wrong, but this is the show running before it can walk. A fetch quest of 5 mini little duds. Consecutive duds. Hey, if they gave out trophies for sheer effort, then sure, but people are much more willing to remember the Vord and the eyes in jars rather than the reality of the thing, which is rapey men in caves and court hearings. You can't criticize the Aztecs, not one line! It's the first season and we're already getting to the heart of the human drama that comes with time travel, and an idea that we'll keep returning to for the next 50 years. And hey, insisting on the drama is why I love this show. There's better examples down the line, sure, but letting Barbara be a character again carries the thing. Doctor Who didn't have to do this. This specific interpersonal character conflict beat is what's going to separate Doctor Who from every other educational family show. The Sensorites. Alien Border Admin has never been so thrilling. This one's like a Star Trek light, and I mean like lights. Oh boy, always wanted to enjoy a diplomacy tale where the Doctor's being a grumpy, impatient, antagonising granddad stuck at customs, but the story is so uneventful that I end up ultimately empathising with the baddies. And look, they're pretty great baddies, but not for 6 episodes! Doo-doo-doo-doom. Way to put some of my favourite characters in an objectively exciting slice of history, and still manage to make it dull. Prison cell tag, more sexual harassment for Barbara, and honestly, the massacre in Series 3 does it all better. There's a reason the most iconic thing in it is the Doctor wearing a hat. Not just because he's serving. Welcome to Season 2 in Planet of Giants. It's year 2 and we've already officially started fobbing off all the rules and expectations attached to the programme. Production design is obviously the focus, which is good, because the core of the story really is just in service of the twist. And you already know the twist, so
Daleks are the masters of Earth.
But mostly just playing tourist by a couple London landmarks. It starts chugging in the final few parts, as per Terry Nation does, but it's fine to lead the story by iconography alone. It may be easy to overlook the political element in that wave of Dalek mania, but when you stop to consider the subtext, boy, it's grim. Gutsy, electric TV of its time. That just isn't terribly interesting these days. The Rescue, though, is one of the best. One of the best in its brevity. A clever 1-2 punch of a setup and a twist. One that plays on the creative limitations of TV at the time. That'll catch modern audiences out all the same. Hello, Vicky, and rest in peace, Sandy. My love. The Romans. Mamma mia. Proof that in the old days, Classic Who could get away with anything tonally. A historical hangout turned situational comedy in the face of horrific slavery. The perfect balance of carry-on chic and ham is so effective, you may not catch series staples rearing their heads for the first time. Ants. 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 I know it's admirable, I know there's nothing like it and it would have wowed the audiences of its day, But come on. The only Doctor Who serial I've never finished. Look, I'll trade in my Whovian license for good. I actively protest sitting through this thing. A line in the sand. I value Doctor Who for its range. But was anybody asking for dry Shakespearean historical? It's not my kind of costume drama, and everybody assumes their default companion positions, but it's still kind of a flex that they did it at all.
A museum? In space?
Delightful part 1 that finally introduces the timey-wimey, but it's much more focused on a run-of-the-mill rebels versus oppressors story. Intentional parody or not, get ready to spend a lot of time with the Morlocks, and not a lot of time in the museum. Scooby-Doo charm will only get you so far. 10 out of 10. Oh no, Dracula's here! Event TV at the height of Dalek mania, The Chase is a ultra-serialized comedic gambit into imagination itself. Both this and Dalek Master Plan will push the Nation Spooner Improv Writing Challenge and the BBC to breaking point. And it does, in fact, break a couple of times, but the show will never ever be this fun or ambitious again. Hilarious and also character-focused, it's TV spectacle at its purest. Some of these episodes are my favourite in the show's history, just for the goofy, childlike confidence. The Time Meddler would so obviously work as a two-parter. Alas, it is 4. My gripes about the monk character aside, his premise just about worked in the authoritarian tone of the 60s. A fully realised time period with an amazing twist. That unfortunately comes 3 parts too late. The monk having a TARDIS is an inciting incident, not a last act cliffhanger. Next up on BBC One, second wave feminism scaremongering, written by a teacher for children. This one's a lovable oddball. One-time writer William Ems allows some weird prejudice to get in the way of his otherwise adorable morality tale about prejudice. Reject Amazonian woman. Embrace Chumbly. The animation plays hard into the colour of the world and the cute character interactions, so I think check out that version, because they understood the brief entirely. Mission to the Unknown is the classic series equivalent of a TARDISode. A prequel to an adventure that did not need more parts. The adaptation is a really interesting experiment though, and it does leave you with this moody, creeping impression, whichever generation watches it. Fittingly, just like a Trojan horse, this story was not what I first expected. There's so little footage remaining and the novelization is just drunk. But it's a smart little comedy story that makes time for a lot of romance. Don't get me wrong, Vicky's contract was up, but they at least stopped to check if she liked the guy they were ditching her with. It's a story populated with likeable idiots with a lot of sharp dialogue, but it's also very, very familiar at this stage. Doctor, am I hearing this correctly? You built the wooden horse to invade Troy? Well, really, you can't change history. Not one line. Dalek Master Plan, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Dalek Time Destructor. BBC, I'm begging you to break this space opera up. I'm more of a chase guy myself, but this is densely rewarding if spaced out correctly. Everyone knows how long it is, everybody knows how dark and weirdly gruesome it is. But do you know how sad and cold it is? It's a lonely, desperate, bloodthirsty affair where the only icon of childlike innocence is ejected out of an airlock a few episodes in. From the Ground Zero Cold War time bomb to a fourth wall breaking Christmas story with Charlie Chaplin to psychedelic imagery with Space Marines, Nation is in his element and going wherever his mind takes him. It's the Terry Nation powwow with a BBC who can't say no. The Massacre. The Doctor goes distant as Stephen gets tested with the darkest history yet. Luke Carotti always found a way to break ground with his historicals, but this is burning up the last of that retro innocence. It's almost inaudible, which really hurts the chattier dramas like this one, but it's criminal that these visual performances are lost to time. It's a slow, cynical 2 hours, but the ending will bring you to tears. There's no time to be sad, there's another young girl to kidnap off the streets. 2 distinctly alien stories for the price of one. The arc is luscious, the arc is genius. It splits its runtime down the middle to do its own sequel. It applies the messing with history dynamic to a future alien story, straight out of an annual for a really great change of pace. Next, the celestial toymaker.
Loud, chaotic, nonsensical.
A production team desperately problem-solving for a serial nobody wanted to be involved in, from the writer to a holidaying Will Hartnell. It's bizarre that the Toymaker has any legacy at all. When you go back and find out all of his set pieces involve pantomime or racist nursery rhymes or just hopscotch at one point. The finale is hopscotch. Sound fun? No, not really. The Gunfighters. A bad reputation, one of the worst in the show, but it's a Disneyland Western, and the song lets you know it's a comedy of ham, but at least a cast of fun. Please God, Dodo, put down the fucking gun. In The Savages, Doctor Who is admired by a fascist society. Cool, let's have him never question that. It's the missing story I revisit the most, though I'm starting to believe it's because it's mostly unmemorable, more than anything else. It's a neat little inversion of a revolution, and Dodo and Stephen get the limelight because the Doctor's off despondent, sucking up to the Doctor Who fan club. But it's long, formidable, and it doesn't do as much with a Doctor Society as you'd want. It's frustrating, good, but deserves to be better. The War Machines is a likeable, groovy romp, but it's never compelling. Part 1 is so hip and welcoming, this could almost serve as a soft pilot reboot, but we're also playing the hits. Have you noticed? It's adorable to watch a late career Hartnell embody the Doctor Who of the annuals. And I do think of it every time I see the Post Office Tower in London, but this one is distinctly kids media. And if you squint your eyes, you might just think it's Dalek Invasion of Earth. Dead media tells no tales. The Smugglers isn't revolutionary, but you'd be disappointed if the Hartnell era ended without a light pirate historical. Historical? Caper. Fantastic Cornish location, provides a really fun first outing for our new companions, and that prison scene alone will win you over to them. The 10th Planet, the first introduction to the icon... Yeah, sorry, could you turn that down? Boy, somebody at the BBC was sure proud of that sound effect, because it dominates these 4 episodes more than our villains. Our new iconic show-stealing villains. Pushing the mark in concept and design, but with admittedly not much to do. It's a definitive story, rather than an outright essential one. A Ben and Polly test run for sieging bases. Power of the Daleks might just overstay its welcome, but Whittaker carries Doctor Who over its biggest hurdle yet, and does it with timeless panache. Ben and Polly do tons to land it, but it's Whittaker letting the audience be ahead of the plot that really pins you right in this new jumpy Doctor's corner. Nobody writes the Daleks like him, terrifying and now imbued with hubris? Maybe even soul. Now you may not learn too much about them redcoats, but it's funny for the wee wins. I deny how they do it, but it balances Clown Troughton with some of the real rough edges of history. He's wearing kooky disguises, but somehow it's still earnest and dangerous. The Underwater Menace is my big hot take. One of the last big fantasy mode tales of the 60s, there's a fascinating purity to a mad scientist destroying Atlantis just because. But it's so much more than its fish people reputation suggests. It's ambitious, competent, genuinely funny, with space for real body horror too. Nobody will be seated for the 10-minute Fishman ballet. The Moonbase is every episode of Doctor Who. Every episode of Doctor Who is in turn aping the Moonbase. I think it's the quintessential Doctor Who serial. What should be a stock audition tape for the Cybermen as new series regulars results in a lot of series firsts. Some bold assertions for my lead that finally lock the Doctor in as a hero scientist for good. It's as goofy and simple as a base under siege comes, but last time I checked, us Who fans kinda go in for that sort of thing. Sci-fi with a capital S. And no, that does not stand for sexism. Macra do not exist! But if they did, I think they'd bring us a deceptively fascist Ian Stewart Black story. Yeah, another one. It was the animation that made a lot of people realise, oh, this was one of the really good ones. A secret sleeper hit of the 60s. The Holiday Colony is the saddest, most familiar dystopian world we've seen yet, and I wasn't expecting such a creepy, surreal 1984 from The Lost One with the Rubber Crabs.
Well, this is gay.
The Faceless One. films. This one's really boring. Good thing it's only short. Oh wait! Even good animation won't make this one go any faster. Unredeemable. Evil of the Daleks. Now that this one's on DVD, the sacred sheen has worn off slightly, and in the cold light of day you can see the boggling, snoozy pacing for what it really is. It's still a favourite, but one that is always a bit of a blur in my memory. The Jamie Doctor conflict is an inspired core, and it's a story with a lot of highlights. Less sword fight, more human baby Daleks doing spinnies. If you can't handle evil at its worst, you don't deserve the Daleks at their best. The natural final conclusion of the 60s idea of the Dalek. Thank God we've seen the last of those guys. Then straight over to Tomb of the Cybermen. 60s fans must have been living. Iconic and sprawling. It's a sci-fi twist on a haunted house, and the expedition feels huge. It feels convincing. But once they've actually arrived, the tension's gone almost entirely, and the curious party of characters become paperweights and apparently disposable. But that imagery, TV history. The Abominable Snowman boasts my favourite setting in all of Doctor Who. It's gorgeous, evocative locations and side characters are more nuanced than they need to be. Watch it? Now I want to live in this adventure. One imagines how the visuals could have possibly matched this mad ambition, but they did, and they must have done because the plot actively demands it. This is the majority of what you're gonna be hearing in the Ice Warriors. A base under siege adventure that will make you question if you even like base under siege adventures. Every now and then you'll get treated to the icy outdoors and glimpses of Victoria coming into her own, but until then it's maddening. It's junk. Enemy of the world. It's really quite good. A political scheming action story with very little action in it when you actually sit down to analyse it. Exciting all the same, even with so little. It takes the Doctor 4 episodes to actually get involved. But as far as I'm concerned, it deserved its reappraisal. Bruce. The Web of Fear is my dad's childhood favourite, so it gets extra brownie points for that. More visually iconic than an out-and-out narrative classic. Drenched in atmosphere lent to it by mixing the mundane with the bizarre. Season 5 is a behemoth of quality. The monsters and the location do all the heavy lifting, which is good, actually, because the characters certainly aren't, as they squabble amongst themselves for a saboteur spy twist that totally falls flat. But hey, the Brig's here. Baby Brig. I think I'm just grateful this one still exists, which might cloud our judgment somewhat. Victor Pemberton's Fury from the Deep is like waking up from a one-night stand and being like, oh, you looked better last night. If that sounds like a fucking mental comparison, part of me thinks it was the enigmatic silent menace of this audio that gave this one such a creepy charm and good reputation throughout the years. But now there's a bright, colorized Captain Pugwash animation of the story. I think we all just projected a better story onto it. Victoria's reason for leaving the TARDIS is great. It's just a shame they start weaponizing those screams to defeat the bad guy. It's a sweet, gradual story with a nice ending. But Troughton's kind of bored, the sidecast are interchangeable, and the cliffhangers are a bit wank. Reportedly, the Wheel in Space was intended to be the first meeting of the Cybermen and the Daleks. And that does feel right watching it, because there are many Dalek-sized chunks missing from it, where some plot should be. Or anything, really. Dead air all over this thing, and you end up with Cybermats as the primary antagonist. Thank you? It's 1968, and I feel we're already starting to tread water with the Cybermen. It's routine, but at least we got Zoe out of it. The Dominators is a story I'd love to watch with a big crowd. The titular Dominators down to their adorable pet robots are dorky sci-fi. This is really lame stuff. Old-fashioned even for the 60s, but this anti-pacifist lesson sure lacks some audience identification. Fun though. The Mind Robber is the peak of the 60s and the heart of the whole show. I would recommend this piece of TV to anybody, and the charm would come across first time. Massive cardboard ambition and wobbly anything-goes imagination, but now with the confidence behind the camera to make it work. Haunting, playful, magic. I also think Celestial Toymaker is its uninspiring evil brother. Like an evil twin. And then, like a dream, the invasion right after. Look, sure, maybe they fight an office intercom for 3 episodes. Yeah, maybe you get a bit dizzy from all the return trips to Vaughn's HQ, but everywhere you go, it's charming, moody, and just a pleasure. Great building unit action that eventually became the templates. Doctor Who owes a lot to the efficiency of this serial. It makes everything look easy. Crotons. Sorry, I'll put in some effort once the TV show does. I'll reciprocate. Acid trippery visuals and crystal monsters still manage to somehow be dull. Genuinely impressive. The Seeds of Death! Look past the gang defeating the monster of the week via turning the heating on, and you've got a solid pessimist bit of TV here, correctly predicting we'd lose the magic of space travel once we landed on the moon, and sort of throwing our own fears of colonization back at us British. It veers in quality, and sometimes you have to nudge it to wake it back up again. The same cannot be said for the space pirates. Supposedly strong in rehearsals, every aspect of production was drained by the behemoth finale filming next door. But it's still creative autopilot. Human antagonists, being Dr. Light and instead zooming in on an interchangeable space crew, equals no one's favourite part of the formula given the limelight. There's been good bottle dramas and cabin fever freighters before. This ain't it. May it stay lost forever, just out of sheer insignificance. And finally, finishing off the swinging 60s, is the War Games. The War Games completely bounces off of me. Send me to the firing squad. A good final episode does not a good story make. The double feature-length embodiment of the story loop. Man, this 12-part story could have been told in 5. And I'll go to my grave saying it. The concept is cool, but I absolutely get the point, guys. By the time part 17 comes around, I think I'm on the Time Lord's side. Doctor Who was a mistake. Get a job, idiot. No, not like that.